Most people think Machiavelli was just a ruthless thinker from the past, someone extreme or outdated, but the uncomfortable truth is that his ideas didn't disappear. They evolved. And if you start paying attention, you'll notice the same patterns showing up in conversations and social dynamics, and in the way certain people seem to stay in control no matter the situation. The reason for that is simple. Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't trying to describe how people should behave. He was describing how they actually do, and that's what makes his thinking still relevant today. In The Prince, the focus isn't morality or ideal behavior, it's effectiveness. What works, what gets results, and what allows someone to maintain power over time, even in unpredictable environments. And once you look at human behavior through that lens, something starts to become clear. People are far more predictable than they appear, not because they're simple, but because they're driven by the same underlying forces: self-interest, emotion, and the need for status. And those forces shape decisions far more than logic alone. One of the first patterns you begin to notice is that people don't judge you based on your intentions as much as they judge you based on outcomes, which means you can have the best intentions in the world, but if the result comes across as weak, uncertain, or ineffective, that's what people remember. While someone who appears decisive and gets results often earns respect, even if their methods aren't perfect. This is where perception becomes more important than explanation, because the moment you rely on explaining yourself to maintain how people see you, you start losing control over that perception, whereas clarity and certainty tend to shape how people interpret your actions far more than long justifications ever could. And this is where it gets interesting, because once you realize that perception matters more than explanation, you also start to notice how often people try to control perception indirectly, not by clearly stating things, but by choosing what to reveal, what to hold back, and how certain they appear while doing it. Machiavelli understood that power is not only about what you do, but about how what you do is perceived. And perception is rarely built through over-explaining. It's built through consistency, restraint, and the ability to communicate without needing to say everything. That connects directly to another principle. The less you reveal, the more control you keep, because when you constantly explain your decisions, your reasoning, and your intentions, you remove ambiguity. And while that might feel honest, it also removes a layer of psychological advantage, since ambiguity allows people to project their own interpretations. And those interpretations often work in your favor when you don't interfere with them. There's a kind of quiet authority and restraint in saying what needs to be said and then stopping, not because you're hiding something, but because you understand that not everything needs to be made explicit, and that over-communication can sometimes weaken the impact of what you're trying to convey. Some people naturally operate this way. They don't rush to justify themselves. They don't feel the need to fill silence, and they don't constantly try to control how they're perceived through explanation. And because of that, they tend to come across as more grounded, more certain, and ultimately harder to question. Another idea that often gets misunderstood is Machiavelli's view on being liked versus being respected, where he suggested that if you have to choose, it is safer to be feared than loved. Not because fear is the goal, but because fear implies consequences. And consequences create boundaries, and boundaries shape behavior. In reality, people don't just respond to how you treat them. They respond to what they believe they can get away with, which means that when there are no clear consequences, even well-intentioned behavior can start to be taken less seriously over time. This is where many people lose control without realizing it, because they assume that being consistently agreeable and accommodating will naturally lead to respect. But without boundaries, those same traits can begin to signal uncertainty or a lack of firmness, which subtly changes how others interact with them. Machiavelli's perspective forces you to look at behavior without filtering it through how things should be. And when you do that, you begin to notice that social dynamics are shaped by small, repeated signals. How much you say, how quickly you respond, what you choose not to say, what you tolerate, and what you ignore. And those signals influence perception far more than any explanation ever could. The people who understand this, whether consciously or not, tend to move differently, not in an obvious or dramatic way, but in a more controlled and deliberate manner, where they don't react to everything, they don't explain everything, and they don't feel the need to be fully understood at all times, because their focus is on maintaining clarity and position, rather than constantly managing approval. And this doesn't mean becoming cold or manipulative. It simply means becoming aware, because once you start recognizing these patterns, you also begin to notice when they're being used on you, when someone is shaping perception instead of explaining truth, when someone is holding back information intentionally, or when someone projects certainty in a way that makes them seem more convincing, regardless of whether they're right. That awareness changes how you respond, because instead of reacting immediately, you start observing more closely, paying attention not just to what is being said, but to the intention behind it and the outcome it's trying to create. And ultimately, that's the value of understanding this kind of psychology, not to manipulate others, but to stop being unaware of the dynamics that are already happening around you. Because whether you engage with these dynamics or not, they still exist, and they've always existed. Machiavelli simply chose to describe them without pretending otherwise. And once you understand that, you start to see that power isn't always loud or obvious, but often quiet, controlled, and rooted in a deep understanding of how people actually behave, not how we wish they did. And that shift in perspective alone changes the way you move through the world. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you found this video valuable, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep making more videos like this.